Welcome, everyone, to our 5th episode of the Ashen Forge. Y'all know me as Phantomix. I am joined by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin, and today's title is Blades Clash with Purpose. How's everyone doing?
Doing pretty good.
Doing great. So we just finished with the 4th of July this past week, fireworks. And I think our main topic today is going to be PvP. And for Ashes of Creation, I consider PvP to be split up between player versus player conflict and player versus player combat. And I get the player versus player conflict from EverQuest Next. They showed off in the 2014 SOE Live more in-depth details of story bricks, and they let us know that really the foundation of that game, what's driving the stories and the narrative, is conflicting objectives for the races or maybe even the classes, the different regions, and how kind of everything that you do may have a negative impact on other regions, other zones. And that really actually bumped up my zeal for PvP, which originally was 0. And the example that they gave was that the Silver Pine Dark Elves are building these processors that will convert life energy into shadow magic, and the shadow magic powers your stealth. It powers your shadow spells, and as a thief or a rogue, I'm usually using shadow magic for stealth. And so if I've got to kill some dryads and steal their life magic and have that siphoned into shadow magic, then I got to kill some dryads. And if druids are going to try and stop me from doing that, I might have to kill some player character druids too. But as those different objectives of different groups conflict, that kind of drives the PvP combat. So I'm expecting to be way more interested in PvP combat than normal. And so that's because of the conflict. We have real reasons to want to fight, other than just, oh, I want to show off my strength, or I want to ruin your day, or I want to steal your stuff. It's like, I kind of need to do this. So I want to be able to do anything that I want to do. And in Ashes, that's called meaningful conflict. So people are thinking that they have this corruption system that is going to drive down PKing, but I think they don't realize that to me, in my mind, I think more of the PvP combat that we engage in is going to be driven by legitimate player versus player conflict. And we're going to have more combat than people are thinking, because it's not going to be just PKing, because you can. But you guys are, not you guys. I know Neuro is more into PvP combat than I am.
So taking it to a new level.
Yeah. It kind of depends. It's the sort of thing that at this point, if it has no context to it, I'm not really as much of a fan of it. PlanetSide 2, obviously, it's a 3-way factional struggle for control, and nobody can ever win. You can just get yourself a better advantage and try to retain that advantage as long as you can. But really, it's there is only PvP. It's not like there's a PvE alternative. Versus I think almost more of trying to join a large sandbox server for a game like Ark or Rust or something along those lines, or even Minecraft, where there might already be established people, or maybe it's a new server and everybody's starting to establish themselves and form their cliques and their groups and everything. And with something like that, because the sandbox isn't a it's a persistent environment, but it's not one where everything is just constantly respawning at static locations and everything. The things that people actually do and, what they do to affect the world is actually a permanent, lasting thing. And, it's for those sorts of games, so the scale is small. It's not a massive map. It's a decent sized map, but it's not, really the size of, a small world scale. And on top of that, it's just the number of players is so small, and between the size of the map and the number of players, you end up only being able to have a limited experience. Plus whatever people can mod in. That's the advantage of those, is you can put in a lot of mods usually, so you can turn it into the experience you want it to be, versus a full-scale MMO. You're not going to be modding anything. Maybe UI stuff like WoW does, but for the most part, yeah, if you're trying to mod the game, you're probably on the fast track to getting banned and maybe even sued, which is starting to become more popular due to the bad people these days. So it's one of the things that you get, the advantage that you can finally play on a larger scale and have the things that you're doing, what friends you make, what doors you open to let friends you've made previously in to ransack the place and steal everything, that sort of stuff, that sort of fun and that sort of treachery and that sort of those sorts of machinations. That's really something that I think people are interested in, because you can't do that in WoW. You don't have that in WoW. The closest, I think the first game that you could really do that in a legitimate way was Ultima Online, and I remember doing that. It's like, hey, I let my PK buddies into this anti-PK. It wasn't a castle; it was like a fortress, but everyone had all of their chests. Nobody put any traps on them or anything. They were locked, but they didn't have traps. And yeah, and that was one of the other fun things, is I'd be following, like, the PKs would be telling me, hey, we're going to go hit this place. And they'd start running through and killing everybody and taking all the nice magical loot, all the stuff they left behind that was still, pretty decent. I was able to collect to my heart's content. So, if I ended up catching up with him, it's like, hey, okay, I'm going to stand back while you guys nuke everything in sight. Don't want to get hit by that. But that was the sort of fun and interesting sort of conflicts and stuff, that the fact that there's player killers, which they had a lot of penalties and stuff. It was actually really bad at some points in UO. If you died, you lost like half your attributes and half your skills. It's ridiculous. Every single time you die, if you're at low reputation, so like you can easily basically die yourself into a hole. But the fact that there was actually some sort of meaning to that conflict, that what you actually did actually had consequences, you going and looting all of that stuff, those are things from other players you just looted. They're going to have to try to get those sorts of items again one way or another, or they're never going to get them again, because the chances that you'll find them are, incredibly rare. That's the sort of stuff that I'm really excited to see. I'm really, really interested to see on the larger scale. That being said, the agency of it, the ability to, opt in or not opt in, I'm glad that it's going to be something that's kind of restricted, that if you're out in the world trying to do something in a conflicted area, a contested area, and you either represent one of those sides, or by being neutral, either one thinks that you're, part of the other side and is freely open to go after you, it's going to make things interesting, trying to travel through a war zone versus trying to travel that exact same path when there's nobody there, or maybe when it's high spring and there's all sorts of nasty beasties out to get you, and you want people to be out there just so that way there's a higher odds that you'll be able to get through. That's all the stuff that I'm really interested in seeing. And then, as you were saying, on the larger scale, the nodes competing, regions competing, city states and stuff like that forming and competing for resources and popularity and trade and all of that sort of stuff, and who's the best and one's up and that stuff's awesome. That competition brings out the highest levels of things, the biggest and the baddest and the bestest. You're not going to see the the highest level of content if you don't have people at least competing at that level, except if you have the alternative situation, which I imagine would happen like the Asia server or whatever, the China server, where 90% of the people are all part of one corporation. So yeah, you would probably have like nice cities everywhere where nobody would fight each other, which would be quite interesting to see too. And I'd really like to see that. Would essentially be the PvE version of the game, and it would be fun and interesting to see, but I don't think it's the sort of thing they should force by any stretch.
I think what people are going to have a hard time wrapping their heads around is sort of the goals, I guess, or the context of what PvP conflict means, because we're so used to, like, what would you say, Neuro, with PlanetSide 2? What was the goal? What was the ultimate goal playing that game? Was it just to kill people and occupy a space?
It was to get the devs to finally see that they didn't give Banu Sovereignty a fair shake with their weapons and freaking balance it already. No, but other than that, the overall goal is to conquer the continents. If you conquer a continent, you get special bonuses that apply across the other continents while you're fighting on them. The number of continents that are open of the 4 is limited to the population that's playing. So if you've got small numbers, you're only going to have 1 to 2 open. If you've got larger numbers, you're going to have 3, potentially all 4 open, which means those benefits are more open and up in the air for people. But
does it change what you can do in the game?
I mean, it gives you advantages being able to, though I think they might have adjusted these recently. It was being able to get a discount on ground vehicles, air vehicles. But
you could still have access to those regardless.
Yeah, you have access to everything.
That's what I'm getting at. World of Warcraft, or even EverQuest back with PvP. It's you have the ability to kill someone, or World of Warcraft. You can go into a battleground and get points or whatever, and then you can spend later for some sort of items. But yeah, that's what I think most people are used to. So this idea of PvP conflict versus combat is so different, because when I PvP in most of the, in all the MMOs I've played, it doesn't actually change what I can do. It's sort of a side thing, a game that I can do on the side, or if I'm out questing and I want to join in on some battle, maybe I can kill a flight master and for 5 minutes they can't fly somewhere, but it always comes back. That for me is, and really what sort of, I'm not a PvPer, but that is what sold me on and getting into this game so much, is the conflict that comes out of that, and the story that comes out of that. And I think it'll be interesting to see how people take that once you're able to start playing. Because they'll probably, if anyone's like me and they don't really think too much about it, it's like, oh, PvP, I'm not going to do that. Well, it's not necessarily the PvP that you think it's going to be.
Right.
It could be, but it doesn't have to be.
Right. And then what do you gain by moving a node from stage 3 to stage 4? And what happens when you don't get those perks, whatever those perks are? If you're a farmer and you need to be at stage 4 in order to be able to craft certain items, then if somebody comes and destabilizes that, delevels that area from stage 4 back down to stage 3, what do you got to do? Are you just going to settle for being back at stage 3 crafting? Or are you going to do whatever you need to do to try and help bump that area back up to stage 4? We know that one of the ultimates is, for the scientific nodes, is fast travel network. So that's kind of the only fast travel that they're going to have, is when a scientific node reaches Metropolis stage 6, and decide to build a fast travel network, which is just really local. But I think of all those people who hate fast travel. Will they hate it enough that they want to make sure that that scientific node never builds one? Or if they do build one, will they try and knock them back down to stage 5? And, that kind of struggle. How does building a fast travel network affect trade nearby and other nodes and things like that? So that's going to be the interesting thing to see, is how what's developing in one area pushes you to want to engage in combat, so you can change the dynamics.
So what I'm curious about, and maybe you can answer this, Dix, because you're more in tune with all this, I think, than the rest of us. We all know, obviously, if I'm a farmer, the economics, if I want to compete with someone, then at that point I might want to knock another node down or take a metropolis down in order to economically benefit from that. I don't know that I guess that would be kind of PvE, I guess. Not really, but kind of. So I guess for me, the question, all the PvEers that come into this system, I don't know if they've talked about this. Obviously, also if you want your town to grow into a metropolis, there's already 5. You're going to have to take something down to be able to grow into that. But does it actually change the PvE around you? So if I want to enter into a new storyline, new quests, am I going to be able to do that, or am I going to actually have to do this PvP conflict route in order to have access to that?
So the thing is, everything is kind of PvP conflict, because everything you do affects everything else. So, and that's kind of the beauty of it to me, is in the scenario that I gave, where I'm killing dryads in order to steal their life magic. I mean, from my perspective, that's just a PvE engagement. I'm killing mobs and siphoning their life energy and going back to my place and processing that energy. So that's really PvE, although in the scenario, if you kill too many dryads, that once the life energy drains in that region, some kind of shadow mobs start spawning, and eventually, if you drain it too much, it's going to break the shackles of these shadow demons who will just go through and siphon life from everything. And so the expectation was
pretty much brought like a third faction of the region if you let them get
exactly, and the dark elves realized they need to ally with the elves and druids that were protecting the dryads, because the shadow demons just kill everybody. They don't care. But it's that kind of thing. From my perspective, I'm thinking that I just wanted a little extra shadow magic so I can have better stealth, but that negatively impacts another region, and then the people in that region are going to have a response to that. The conflict is kind of happening all the time. It doesn't always need to lead to combat. And then whatever farmers might be contributing to a war or a siege doesn't necessarily have to be direct combat. So you wouldn't necessarily have to participate in combat if you wanted to avoid killing other player characters. You wouldn't necessarily have to take that action. There, you could be helping out by supplying them with food or drink that would provide buffs, things like that, and heals and all that kind of stuff. So, but again, what that means is that you could be out thinking you're just doing PvE stuff, but other people are like, no, we need to stop you, because what you're doing is gonna, cause these other mobs to start spawning and destroying our villages. And if you don't stop, we're gonna have to stop you.
Yeah.
And
because if I remember correct, one of their videos mentioned if you dig too deep, then something else is going to come up and you're going to have to fight it. So I guess my question would be, can I go to another area, another node, of which I do not belong as a citizen, and start digging too deep?
You could. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing, because everything that we do, anything that happens anywhere affects the node. But also some of the stories and events and mobs even get some of them get generated based on the buildings that were built. So there's all kinds of stuff with that. If you destroy those buildings and then they rebuild different buildings, that's going to change the story. If you destroy a node and de-level it from stage 6 to stage 5, and you're able to build yours up then from stage 4 to stage 5, that building is going to cause stories and mobs and events, new stuff all the time. So that's really what's driving everything.
So let's say I'm part of the metropolis or whatever, the level 5 or level 4 town, and someone is trying to sabotage my where I live and where I'm a citizen. I guess my next logical question would be what do I get to do to stop them? Because there's the corruption system. So if I come into your node and I'm not, I guess, quote, flagged, and I'm tearing things down, you could stop me, but doesn't that then give you corruption?
Right.
Where you actually get...
And that's the thing I've been telling people too, because people think that corruption is going to be a very strong deterrent against player killing. And I've been trying to give people these scenarios where, you go into this other area and you're doing PvE stuff. It's going to have a negative effect on their region, so they want to stop you. But they attack you, and you don't attack back, and they kill you. They get corruption, even though what they were doing was technically good. They should attack you.
Is that how it's going to work, or is it the sort of thing where you take an action that accrues corruption and that negates the ability for people to accrue corruption for attacking you?
No. So there's 3 states of combat. And everybody by default is a non-combatant. Then if you engage in combat, you become a combatant. And so if you die as a non-combatant, you receive normal death penalty, which is experience debt and some durability loss. And people can loot raw materials. Those are the 3 that they've talked about. If you die as a combatant, you get half of the normal death penalty. And then if you die as a corrupted, then you get 3 times the normal death penalty. So when you attack, you become a combatant. If you kill someone who's a non-combatant, you become corrupted. So in the go ahead.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you're doing something that would be considered, antagonistic to that region and its interests, would that not already automatically flag you as a combatant? You're already engaging in an act of combat, even if it isn't pulling out a blade and striking someone.
No,
If I'm loading boxes of explosives next to a bank, someone can't stop me and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" Inspect it, see that I'm loading up, so I can blow the whole thing up, and then bring me to the guards or call the guards over and have them run me through. There's no system for that. Is there any way that guards in a town get to negate or evade corruption when they're killing somebody in the name of defense?
So,
because it sounds like
we're
making an exploitable system here.
That's what I was just thinking. I'm going to get 50 of my friends. I'm going to go sit on just inside your node. I'm going to somehow destroy your area or somehow bring death and destruction onto you. And as long as
I don't think you can destroy an area too much. So you'd have to declare a siege in order to do very much damage.
But I mean, somehow impact that node. But as long as I don't flag as a combatant and I don't touch you, you really have no defense to stop me from doing that. Because if you come and kill me, well, you're going to get more and more corruption. And does that also drain on your overall ability?
Yep.
And I can just die, come back, and keep going about my business. I can bring 50 of my friends
Well,
over.
you're getting when you die, you're getting XP debt, and
But my point is that
what's it matter if you just rolled a new character and walked it over with shenanigans with stuff that your buddies brought over for you?
And what's the incentive for the people other than to maintain their area? I mean, they're actually getting penalized for stopping you.
Right.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, that sounds like the sort of thing that players will absolutely make a habit of doing. That was one of the tricks in Ultima Online. You get your reputation super low, you stand right like one square away from the edge of town, and you stand there naked and be like, "Hey, buddy, if you give me 100 gold when I revive, I'll let you kill me so you can get some rep up." It's like, "Oh yeah, sure, that's a great idea, pal." And so you pull out your weapon and you hit them once, and they step back into town, cast incognito, which puts them neutral, and say, "Guards!" And a guard comes and one-shots you with a halberd in the back of the head, just magically appears. And all of your loot's on the ground, and they take it. That's actually why they had to remove that spell. But they didn't actually remove it. That was the absolute dick thing. They just made it that it wouldn't drop anymore. If you had it, you still had it. So it became this rare thing that people who exploited each other would try to acquire. Like that's not the kind of culture that I think you would want to try to make for this game. That's really bad.
Yeah.
That's as bad as the guy on WoW who would like get to the end of a dungeon, then flip it to Master Loot and take everything. Every time. That guy was classic.
And the only way to get rid of corruption is to be killed? Or does it go over time?
So they basically said that the way to get rid of corruption is to die. I'm thinking that there will be other ways to work it off doing normal stuff too, but they haven't really delved into that part very deeply.
Have they said like with, because when I watched that video, what I got into, well, if you dig too deep, well, if you're mining too much and you deplete things too much, you kind of bring about some sort of change. I mean, have they said if you're not, resources within nodes that only citizens can harvest? I'm just trying to think of examples of how I can affect change. That system just seems broken. It sounds great for people that are just out and about killing deer for something, a quest. But that seems like you're penalizing someone for protecting their homeland.
Right. I think that too. So I haven't heard anybody offer a decent rebuttal to that.
Well, I mean, the one thing that would make sense is if you enter into someone else's node, I mean, you're automatically somehow flagged as a combatant. Of course, that's going to piss off a whole bunch of people.
There's reasons, but you aren't automatically a rival. Yeah, you aren't necessarily a rival just because you're in a different node.
Well, how would you change the system though for the node to know why you're there?
I don't think the node can really know why you're there.
Because the only other thing I can think of is somehow keeping track of what you're doing, and if
the nodes are keeping track of what everybody's doing, but I don't think that there's a way to know that.
It just seems backwards.
Well, I mean, we just don't have enough details, but from what they've said so far, I think that the system is. I think the system is flawed myself, but just about 98% of the people on the forum seem to think that it's perfect. I mean, and then it worked in other systems, worked in other games. Well, it's funny because maybe I shouldn't say. I'll say 90% seem to think it's worked perfectly, and kept PKing down in other games. And then 10% are like, "Are you crazy? Have you played like BDO?" Or they'll name some other games and be like, "No, it didn't work there. It's not going to work here."
Well, and
People
the
got-
goal is all different too. I mean, the reasons for, conflict and combat are different. It's sort of like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me that I don't know, that system. I'd be curious to see how that works. Because the only other option would be hiring guards, which of course is an expense.
You can hire guards, and there's but yeah, I just don't know, because the conflict is going to be there, and it does seem to me like I said, even in the scenario that I gave, where I'm killing dryads, if the druids come up and try and stop me, I can just laugh and say, "Ha, go ahead and kill me. You'll gain corruption. I'm going to keep farming dryads."
I mean, that's right. I mean, you have the only incentive to actually stop someone is to keep your, I guess, theoretically keep your node from de-leveling or whatever, or changing. But through doing that, you're actually not gaining anything other than maintaining the status quo. Because you're also, I would assume, that doesn't count towards improving your node,
right?
Either. So there's no trade-off there. Well, I gain corruption, but I'm also increasing the level of my node by getting rid of this person.
Right.
Or I guess the only other option would be, but again, how do you create a system where the game automatically knows that this person is somehow changing the node, and the citizens can go kill them, but then not get corruption or get a lower level of corruption? I don't know how you would work that into the mechanics or the system, but
right.
Well, the example that I gave was placing explosives next to a bank. I think if you're placing explosives anywhere in the node, for example, that could be considered an act of combat or an act of aggression. It could be, though, that if you're doing that within an area of the mine that's been designated okay for blasting, if there's some way to designate parts of the mine for okay for things and not okay for things, then I would imagine it'd be fine. If you use it out in the open field and you're just like setting a trap to blow some giant horse creature up or something because you want its meat and giblets or whatever, whatever. Okay, that's probably not going to be too much harm. It seems like it'd be the sort of thing where the actions you take and the potential intent of them is what would be assessed. On top of that, that's where I feel like guards and security and people who are deputized as some form of authority are supposed to be the intermediary. They're the ones who can potentially determine that somebody's doing is illegal and take action against it. It could be that if you're just like, "Oh, you sneezed, I'm killing you. Oh, I thought you stole something, I'm killing you." That you're killing people left and right. You'll still build up corruption, but if you're doing it at a slow pace, and it seems like you're doing something deliberate and investigating rather than just being an excuse to go on a killing spree in town, then it would potentially be assessed differently. Now, the other thing I've been wondering, we've seen it in a couple of games, and I'm not going to say that it works great or it doesn't work great, but is there going to be some sort of a judgment or tribunal system that if you catch someone doing something, you would be able to get people to make a vote or an assessment on whether that activity is illegal or whether they're in the wrong or something? Or is that just something that you would do out in the streets, and then whoever's going to take the corruption hit for the execution is going to be the one to do it?
Yeah, no type of tribunal, no kidnapping or jailing. I am curious, though, whether, because we can vote on certain things in the town or the city, I'm wondering if we'll be able to vote to make certain things illegal. Maybe certain classes or certain spells or abilities or certain weapons, or I'm wondering if there will be some something like that where we can vote to declare certain things illegal for that city, but I haven't heard them say anything like that. Yeah, another example I had been thinking of was like if you build a bridge over a stream or something like that, or a river, and the fishermen are like, well, that's killing the fish, or that's getting in the way of my fishing. I can't fish at the same level that I could before, so I'm going to blow up that bridge. Technically, blowing up the bridge is PvE.
Technically, building the bridge is PvE. If you're building unauthorized infrastructure, that could be tantamount to banditry. That
I'm saying from the PvE point of view, that's a PvE encounter. I'm not killing other player characters. I'm just blowing up buildings.
Well, it is PvP because
it's PvP conflict, but I'm saying it's PvE combat, and that's one of the things that I'm saying is different.
It's conflict over a resource or part of the environment. It just happens to be one that you're not conducting with direct combat.
Right, and so from the people who say, because people have been saying, how can you take the PvP out? It's all PvP. And I'm like, well, there is PvP conflict, but from the PvE player's perspective, he's not killing other player characters. He's just blowing up buildings. So that's PvE combat from that perspective. But then, like you're saying, what does that mean in terms of combat? Why doesn't that flag you as a combatant?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, what I was saying there, the idea that you're in the region, the sovereignty or whatever of a node, and within that region, without permission or authorization, you start building. Now, depending on the rules or depending on how things are, it could be, oh yeah, we love people building their own little backwoods hovels to make moonshine and stuff. That's great. You guys do some awesome stuff out there. Others might be like, nope, we value our security. We don't know what you're going to do. We don't know what dark evil things you're going to do, or if you're building up a camp to come attack us. If you build anything outside our area without any permission, we're just going to assume you're bandits. And it's gonna I don't know if that would inflict corruption or if it would simply flag you as a combatant such that somebody could freely attack you.
Right. I don't think you only get flagged if you attack a person.
I'm trying to think of ways. Well, how do you change the system? Because that system sounds incredibly broken. Well, I mean, in theory, I guess, when it comes to protecting your node.
Grumble tumble in chat there, I agree. Sorry, could you repeat that? You were coming, it was like breaking up a little bit there.
Oh, I was just saying, in theory, this system sounds like it's not going to work. It'll work in some places, but not overall. So I guess I'm trying to think, how could you fix it, or how do you keep the system but change it? One is sort of what you just mentioned, Neuro, is can you, as the mayor of a town, declare a certain number of people guards of that node, and then they can go out and assess what's happening, and they can kill someone. Maybe again, you still run into the whole corruption problem. So maybe they gain corruption slower, or maybe they have some sort of ability where if you protect your node, you're able to go back and have it removed by some other means within your town, other than dying. I guess that would be one way. Another, I guess, if you could somehow hire NPC guards that you could, I guess, for lack of a better way to do it, carry in your bag and just deploy them wherever you're at, and let them sort of handle that. Or I guess another thing that comes to mind, and I think you guys were just mentioning, is can you set sort of limits or laws within your node as a ruler or as a group, where I know, where we were mining this area and we realized that this certain amount, it starts to get bad for us. So we're going to make a rule where you can only mine so many pieces of ore in such a period of time. And if you go over that, we won't stop you. But if you go over that, well, that automatically flags you as a combatant to our area. and now we can come and actually take care of you without that risk of, the imbalance that seems to be there now with the non-combatant and the chaos, the corruption that gets gained by someone trying to get rid of you. I don't know if any of those would work or all of them would work, or that just sounds, I hadn't actually thought about that until you just brought this up, in the idea of PvP conflict rather than combat. How do you, because that for PvP combat, it sounds like a good system, but the overall conflict, not so much. I don't know.
But we'll have to get in and play, and they'll have to see how people try to work around the system. One of the things that I was saying is, if I wanted to gank people, and I don't like ganking people, but if I did, I would just make a whole bunch of alts that were zombies. I mean, I'm role-playing them as zombies, but I level them up to level 5 or level 10 and go out and start ganking, and I gain as much corruption as I can, and people try and kill me if they want to, but that's part of the fun. Like, I'm a zombie, so you can kill me. They're like, nobody would do that because, you might lose gear, and, your combat effectiveness is going to drop, and at some point you won't be competitive. And I'm like, but I'm playing a zombie.
And if your goal isn't, if you don't really care how much copper you mine, if all you care about is somehow triggering an event to get rid of that node, you don't really care if you lose whatever you were doing, because that's not your objective. That's not your goal.
That's what I'm saying. If it's on an alt, and that's the purpose of the alt, is to cause some grief, I don't care.
He just reminded me of one of my favorite things in Warcraft 2. If you can get your Goblin Sappers or the Dwarfish Barrel Squad or whatever early enough in the game, you can clear a path to the enemy mine. 2 or 3 of them would blow up a gold mine. So you can starve the enemy of resources really quickly if you can get some of those in there. That's the sort of thing that I think of would be, if you've got 2 nodes that are heavily competing, they're both on the cusp of level 6 or whatever. One of them just wants to get there faster because they want to be number 1 in the region. I could see them doing something like that, trying to sabotage the resources and supply infrastructure, and potentially just sending their own people. It's like, oh, yeah, we're just going to send a bunch of lumberjacks. They're going to mingle with all of your lumberjacks, except when they load up all of their carts, they're going east towards us rather than west towards you. And then we're still going to be, clear-cutting your force. In fact, we're going to be clear-cutting. We're not even going to be doing that kind of measured thing where you take, you leave every third tree or whatever. No, we're just gonna cut it down. Just completely change the biome. Your forest is going to be plains.
I think that's a good question that we should see if we can get answered is, are you able to tell who else is a citizen of your node? Is there some kind of flag or something that's showing you these people are citizens and these people are not citizens? I wonder about that. I mean, let's see. Nope. I was going to say, so you cannot attack anybody in your party, your guild, your raid. Let's see, it's party, guild, raid, and alliance. And those are the only 4 that you can't. Fellow citizen isn't one of those. So that's kind of interesting. How would you got a bunch of people harvesting. How would you know whether or not they're a citizen? And you might be harvesting before you become a citizen. So that's a good question. I don't even know how you know if you don't want that person harvesting in your area.
I feel like you would have to leave citizens out of that cannot kill, because, if part of this, well, I guess it would even apply to guilds, but because part of the idea is that you can come in and sabotage, right? So if I'm a citizen and you do something that I don't like, I have the underhand where I'm a citizen. You aren't going to notice if you're not able to kill me and you see me all of a sudden turning on the town, and you're not able to do anything about it. I could see why they would, allow you to probably have combat against other citizens.
Yeah, well, that's only so if the node is being sieged, then everybody is flagged as a defender of the node. All citizens are flagged as a defender of the node. So during siege time, that's in effect. But I'm just saying, just in general, I don't know. That's just kind of interesting. Well, lots of this, and that's why I'm saying. So I was saying before we started the show that we aren't getting a lot of information from them. I mean, it seems like they told us a lot of stuff during the Kickstarter, but there's lots of little details that they haven't shared with us yet. So they can share that with us bit by bit over time. There's still lots of details to share.
I guess another thing you could do, but again, it gets back to how does the game know who's hurting the node and who's not, or how does the player? Because if there was some way to, well, they're coming in and as Nora put it, turning our forests into plains, and I come in and kill them and stop them. I guess as it is now, you lose some items, but not all items. So one way to counterbalance the corruption that you would gain in that system that seems so unfair would be that you get everything they have. But again, how do you? So you're essentially, if they came and took 200 trees down, well, you get all the wood out of that. So you get a benefit to stopping them, right? You get all of those resources, and maybe those resources get applied to your node the same way as if you had actually harvested them.
We are so so that's what you get when you are killed. The stuff that's lootable is the raw materials. So resources like wood and stuff, you would be able to gain when you kill those people. Yeah,
but then again, how do you know? I mean, how are you able to say that, well, this, because somebody could innocently come in and just be,
right.
They wandered in, they saw a herd of deer and they thought, well, I'm going to go track them down. I'm going to kill them. And on the way, they're mining, they're doing this, they're doing that. They're not a part of the node. They're not a citizen, but they didn't realize they wandered in. So, I mean, how do you separate intent, I guess? And I don't think you can, because there's probably no even AI system that could, well, I guess maybe there is, that could interpret intent, but of humans, but.
Right. And I think, like you said, because there's going to be people there who want to help the node, but haven't become citizens yet. So, and right at some point, the maximum number of citizens is going to be reached anyway. But people might still like living near that node, or, adventuring near that node, trading there and all that stuff.
So you brought this up and people don't recognize the issue, or they don't care? Because that seems like a big issue when the game itself is centered around the idea that you must have, player-driven conflict. That's what I think we can all agree, that this isn't EverQuest Next. There isn't the component of story bricks. There isn't the component of voxels that add something different and new to this world. This is, to get this world to function as they have told us and how they envision it, will require player-driven conflict in the world, right? I mean, it has to happen in order to be the game they have said it will be. They will have...
Yeah. It's kind of node-driven conflict, but ends up being the same thing. The nodes are driving the players into conflict and all that. But they don't focus on the conflict. They primarily focus on PvP combat and PKers. And they think that if the PKing is handled by the corruption, the random PKing is what they call it, then there will be PvP combat, and that's mostly going to be during sieges and caravans. and it's a great system. That's what I hear.
Because, I mean, there's just so many ways it could fail. I hate to say it that way. I mean, a player could come in and a guard come out and kill them, and the player could complain, well, you know, I wasn't doing anything wrong, and then they're going to go to the forums and complain the system's broken. But it could be the opposite too, right? Somebody was guards who are guards are actually going out and using that ability to exploit and player kill if somehow they get a benefit to being a guard, to where they don't get as much corruption or something to them. I mean, it's going to happen both ways when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of players. I don't know. I never thought of it this way. You've enlightened me today.
Well, we'll just have to see. I mean, we'll have to actually get in and play and get some more questions answered, and you know.
I feel like if anything that players start to do becomes too much of a problem, you know, it's being a subscription-based game. When they take action against somebody, it has a lot more weight than a game where you buy the client and then you can access, or a game that's just completely free to play. I think that's one of the things that's hopefully going to help them, is the ability to actually use, you know, actual punishment as a deterrent, telling somebody, you've been a jerk, so we're basically going to take 10 days of your subscription, pocket it, and you can't play for that time because you've been a jerk. And people will quit over it. And if those are the people that are doing the exploits, well, you know, problem solved itself. But I think on top of that, it's the sort of thing where I think people will try to take the game a little bit more seriously because they're actually paying a subscription to it. But obviously, you know, that's not going to be the case for everyone. And then the other thing is the fact that they're going to have, I would imagine, a lengthy pre-launch. I think a lot of these issues will be vetted out. I think they will potentially invite power players from various MMOs to come in and try to break the game and try to break the system and try to fuck things up, specifically so they can know about it and be able to do something about it. Maybe even ask them specifically, okay, you guys just try to break the game. Here, we'll even give you some hints on some things that might be a little weak. And, you know, just let them have it. And, you know, it might be a trial by, you know, actually trying sort of thing.
I guess here's what doesn't sit right with me is that this isn't, I guess, like you found out how to exploit a quest or to duplicate items or gold or whatever, because clearly you can find the intent in that, right? Well, we saw in our database all of a sudden you had 10 gold, all of a sudden now you have 20, you didn't do anything. We know your intent, you were trying to exploit the system. This, on the other hand, is such a central part to this game because everyone, you know, what's the first question of MMOs? Is there PvP? Is it PvE? Well, this is like a big part of their selling point. I feel like this was a huge part of their selling point for Kickstarter. Oh, yes, it's PvP, but no, all you PvEers, because they know that's the bigger population, right? Come, we have a system. We know how to fix this. We know how it's going to work, that you are not going to be impacted by this. But when the system has what appears to be a big problem within how this works, again, it comes down to how can you determine someone's intent? If you can show that they're exploiting or they're somehow found a way to, you know, to ghost in and out of places or super jump or something that clearly is not supposed to be part of the system. This is sort of PvP, and it's like, well, what was your intent? I mean, how can you improve someone's intent when the game is a PvP-driven conflict? I mean, were you trying to play or kill them, or did you actually think they were doing something wrong? And then
right.
how do you enforce that?
Well, and that's what I keep telling them is that, saying on the forums, is that it's a very interesting point of view to me because it seems like the average PvPer thinks of themselves as being very different from being PKers. And it's the PKers who are problems. And so if we just get rid of them, then everybody, all the good PvPers will be there, and PvP is great. And I'm trying to tell them that I'm not even really worried about the PKers, because I think corruption might actually take care of the PKers. But I think the issue is going to be the PvPers, because they're going to have legitimate reasons. They're going to be fighting people, and it's not going to be and killing people, and it's not going to be just because I wanted to kill people or I wanted to steal your stuff. They're going to have legitimate reasons to do it, and PvEers are going to be but.
So here's one of the things that I've kind of been thinking about a little bit, about the idea that if you don't fight back, you don't build corruption. If you fight back, you build, or rather, if you don't fight back, the other person gets corruption, but you don't. So there's a group that exists in every single MMO that should be free to kill everybody. It is their civic duty to kill these players at every cost. You know who I'm talking about?
No.
Gold farmers, foreign gold farmers that are just at a poor grinder sweatshop making, whatever money they're making, and it's being sold through a Canadian site or whatever. They don't talk to you. They don't add anything to the game. They just run around, collect resources, and turn it into money that they can then sell with a credit card transaction outside the game. I don't think not only should there not be any problem with killing them, if they can be identified, they should actually be just full on banned. Just straight get them out of there. Maybe do like Daybreak was claiming to do, where they would actually not just get your IP address, but your MAC address, the hardware profile of your computer, and serial on your hard drive and that sort of stuff. So if you try to install it again without spoofing all of that stuff, they'll see it's you again. I really hope they go to that length and that extent with it. But that's the sort of thing that it would be a real problem if there's a large influx of those sorts of accounts and we can't do anything about it, and they're just strip mining all of the resources. And sure, you can go to town at the markets and get the resources for dirt cheap, but whatever happens when that node gets a little, or that resource gets a little too depleted, or you get too far down there, if you do summon the Balrog or whatever, well, you just had these gold farmers wreck your stuff, and that definitely ruins the experience. And if you can't really be killing them because they don't fight back, well, that's definitely a huge problem.
Yeah, Grumble Tumble is asking, I think you asked this too already, Nero, but he's asking now, what if doing something in another node's area will flag you, which is a suggestion that you brought up. So that's not the current plan, but we'll just have to see. It's kind of difficult because, again, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what's your motivation. You could be legitimately, because you could be there and not be a citizen of any node. And so there's nothing to go on there. You're just harvesting wherever you're harvesting. And just because you are a citizen of one node and you're in a different region doesn't mean that you're an enemy of that node. So,
it almost seems like you mentioned the story bricks example that was given at SOE Live. I guess, have they even painted a picture like that? Because it almost, the more I think about what I've read or seen, the only two areas where I see player-driven change, I guess, obviously you can develop your node, but that's sort of a PvE system. PvP conflict, the only two places I can think of that they even mentioned it is in sieges and then with the caravan system.
Well,
so it almost makes you wonder, is that their only two ideas? Like,
what do you mean by that?
Like, is one way to not have this problem we're talking about make it not even possible? So the only way you can affect change, like in a PvE situation, is through sieges or caravans, where we're not going to get into a situation where I can go cut down trees and somehow summon something to destroy this node.
Well, so
Because that's the easiest answer,
so
right? Well, let's just not even let it
so
happen.
Yeah. So their 4 pillars are, let me see if I can remember their 4 pillars off the top of my head. Their 4 pillars are economy, nodes, meaningful conflict, and narrative. And I think their meaningful conflict is basically the same thing as PvP conflict in EQ Next. And yeah, there are things that you can do. You're going to be driving change from. Yeah, and so they say that everything that you do and everything that they're developing goes back into these 4 pillars.
But what other examples have they given? I guess is my question. Any?
Yeah, I don't know if they have a scenario. I don't know if they have a scenario like. I don't think they've given a scenario like the Story Bricks one.
Because that was an Achilles heel of EverQuest
I
Next.
think I had one. So I think I had one. So for instance, the closest they've given is with the divine. Is spreading divine reputation. So that's one of the things. If you're working on progressing a divine node, you have to go out in the world and spread your religion. And one of the ways that you do that might be setting up a shrine. And if there's only one spot to set up a shrine, which religion gets to set up their shrine there? And how do you go about making sure that your religion has influence in that area rather than somebody else? And that's another example of conflict that I think that we're going to be seeing.
Because I don't know.
It's going to be there because we're going to be at cross objectives for certain things because we can't do everything.
I don't know. The more I think about it, they've not given any other examples, and it seems like it would be easier to implement a siege or implement a caravan, and not so easy to implement this sort of change throughout the entire world. Because as far as we know, and I'm pretty sure we were told this, Storybricks never even made it from concept to code, right? I mean, they never even put together.
So there's
concept.
So what Jeffrey has said is that so Nodes is basically acting in this similar way of Storybricks to that extent. What it's not doing is it's not so robust that all of the NPCs have tags on them and will be changing and reacting to everything that we do. Although the nodes themselves are tracking everything that we do, like the Storybricks system was supposed to do. But down to each NPC having emotions and drives and objectives and all that stuff, they're not going that far. But the node seems to be the Ash's version of Storybricks in the sense of that driving narrative, that pushing story, and that generating mob spawns based on what the players are doing.
Okay.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. I guess we're kind of running over, but we started late too. So I don't know if there's anything else to talk about. I feel like we've kind of exhausted this topic.
Plenty, but I think we need to get more information from them before we can talk about it more, at least on this subject.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems like a big, as you put it, potential exploit when it comes to PvP conflict. So
they've got to be thinking about these things. I'm sure they've got some solution they're working on that they just haven't revealed yet.
Well, you would hope, but again, to go back to EverQuest.
Yeah, well, yeah, we would hope.
The players, for Landmark, the players discovered more ways to work with voxels than the developers did. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, but that's giving thousands of monkeys typewriters rather than being the guy that actually makes the typewriters.
That's true.
It's a little bit of a difference. Like, I didn't know a typewriter could do that. Well, I make them, but now I know.
That's true. It just seems like this is such a central part to this, right? That you get to the alpha stage or the beta stage where you get thousands of players in. It seems like it's kind of late if it doesn't work.
Well, that's the funny thing that I was telling people in the forums too, because they all seem to be thrown by my idea that I would just make a bunch of alts and I don't care, because they're like, no, your character is not going to be able to be competitive. And I'm like, but I don't care about my main character being competitive. I'm using alts, and
they're still not thinking of goals, right? They're still not thinking beyond the how do I compare to my fellow combatant. They're not thinking beyond the how do I change the world. They seem to be all focused on their main character. I have this one character, and I don't want that character to become corrupt. Or if you work on an alt, well, then that's less time for your main, and then you aren't going to be able to be competitive. And I'm like, but if my goal is to destroy your node, I don't care.
Right.
Because it's indirectly.
I play for 8 hours a day, so 2 hours spent ganking a bunch of people, that's, a fourth of my time. I can do that and still progress fairly far on my main character. But Steven doesn't play alts. So he's not thinking about what people will do with alts. He's thinking,
we need to get him to talk to Tamlin, the man that has like 20 alts of max level. So, all right. Well, this will probably be a topic we will revisit, hopefully, once we know a little bit more about the systems. But I think at this point, we're sort of at a point where maybe we stop for tonight.
Yeah.
And pick up in 2 weeks. We were supposed to have a guest on today, so hopefully in 2 weeks that guest will be able to join us then. So I don't know if y'all have any other parting words? No,
that was great. Thank you.
Yep. Looking forward to the next one. See you then.
Have a good weekend. See ya.